this is, sometimes I say this to speaker, this is life-changing information, but this really is life-saving information. So just thank you so much for that. But, one of the things that occurred to me as you were talking about, sometimes we'll hear from some of our speakers about how we as adults need to make adult life more enjoyable, because why would you want to become an adult? Why would you want to go there if we don't make it more appealing? So do the things you like to enjoy so that they get to see you doing those things. So, I wanted to ask you, I think again, there's just so much here, but that takeaway about don't be afraid to have the conversation. I think that's the thing that's such a misconception. So give me the again, once you said this already, the words, what are the words I need to say to my child about this? And then what do I say? How do I start it? What's the next thing I say?
Yeah. So it's really important to be able to say, um, uh, to first of all, to be comfortable using the word suicide or kill yourself, right? And so that's the kind of thing I will say, practice with your partner, practice in front of a mirror, practice with friends. Say, look, um, we're a community of parents, right? At some point, somebody's kid is going to be having thoughts of suicide. Let's just sit around and practice asking the question, right? Um, Asking the question, phrasing it in such a way, right, that you are able to contextualize and say something like, sometimes when kids go through their first really bad breakup, right, the person that was like their everything, the love of their life, and now they're not, they have these thoughts about wanting to end their life, even if that's not something that has ever happened before, even if that's not a thought that's ever gone through their mind. And I'm just wondering, given all that you've been through lately, if that's been happening for you, right? So you ask that and you sort of couch it in those terms. And then when if they say, well, yeah, actually I have, then you can say, that sounds like an incredibly scary and lonely place. Tell me more, right? So you use the tell me more phrase. You don't say, oh, it's going to be okay, we're going to fix it, right? You just say, tell me more. You want to learn the story about how they got to that point, right? And so it very well could get to the point where they're talking about things that you're like, I'm not really equipped to deal with this. And at that point, if it's 3 a.m, you can call 988 and you can say, hey, I'm talking with a 14-year-old here who's sharing some stuff. They don't want to get on the phone, but I'd love for you to help me walk through this. What do I do now? Right? So use 988 as your own resource. Or if it's the day, you call the school counselor, right? Hey, I had this conversation. My kid slept in my room. They're at school now. This is what's going on, right? So you coordinate with them. You call their therapist if they have one, right? You say, okay, we're going to get. So all of these things, there are all these steps, but the first thing is to be able to have the kid talk to you.
Valerie, I know you have a question.
Jonathan, I'm curious, with social media, obviously that was a big topic, and I think it was great how you gave so many tips on how to talk to your teen and making a game plan even before they get a cell phone, so this conversation maybe is happening when they're 7 years old, who knows, depending on what the parent's decision is. Can you talk a little bit about even parents' own social media use and how that might influence, a child's and just the importance of that and just parents being mindful of their own usage?
Yeah. So I think that parental social media use is really important, in the sense that, for example, um, when my kids were little, I posted pictures of them on Facebook, on Instagram, and it got to a certain point where started asking their permission. Right now, this is separate than the conversation about like tech companies monetizing and using images and blah blah blah. This is just about like, is it okay to post something without somebody else's permission? This gets to that conversation down the line about um, cyberbullying, about sextortion, right? Like, did that person give you permission to share that? That's not you. That's somebody else, right? You know that in this house we don't post pictures without people giving permission, right? And there might be a point where the flip happens, which is that you get kids of a certain age who are like, post this online. And you're like, I don't want to. I don't actually think this is as funny or cute as you think it is. I think people could misunderstand it, right? So I'm not going to do that, right? So that's the flip. Alternately, if you have parents that are, you know, sitting at the dinner table on their phone, if you have parents who are on their phone while the kid's trying to talk to them, all of this models things for kids. Now, I think that parents use social media in ways that are fundamentally different than kids. Um, as I mentioned, I'm 54. I was a grown adult. I had figured out who I was before the internet was born, right? So the first web browser was released in 1993. I was like a working adult, right? I had a job, I knew who I was. And that's different than today, where kids are figuring out who they are online and offline simultaneously. So I don't want to diminish that or say that they can just sort of not have social media, because I don't think they can not have social media. But I think it needs to be done in the same sort of ways that we think about monitoring and safety as we would any offline interaction.
This is our last question. When do I know that it's time to seek professional help? What happens when I seek professional help for my child?
So there are a couple of times where you know that it's time to seek professional help, right? And that can be, uh, and by professional help, that can include a mental health professional at a school. It can include the social worker out in the community. It could be a psychiatrist. Um, uh, if you've talked with your kid and the conversation seemed to help, and then it gets worse again, right? And you talk to them and it helps and it gets worse, right? And it seems like the baseline is starting to be that things are not good, right? Things are not getting better. They might get better for a little bit and then they go back to being bad, right? So when the baseline looks like it is shifting to things are not good, definitely you want to go check out a professional, because that's what we're trained to do, right? And there's all sorts of things I could talk about in terms of like symptoms related to diagnoses, and then there's referrals for medication, blah, blah, blah. There's all this sort of stuff, right? But as a parent, that's not what's important for you to know about or worry about. What's important is that you have the best idea of your child's current behavior versus what it used to be. And that is invaluable information. So when you see that your kid is shifting, and again, I know that kids, like kids, especially teenagers, right? Right? They're hot, they're cold, this, that. That's why I'm saying like a trend over time. Is this thing trending downward? Like things are getting worse. Then you definitely have to go see. Not you don't definitely have to go see. That would be a time that where seeking out professional help is indicated. There are specific things if your kid says, I want to kill myself, or if they say, I don't think I can keep myself safe, or any number of things that are sort of what we think of as red flags, then you definitely want to reach out and say, hey, can you help? Can you help out? This, I don't know what's going on. I need somebody who can do a fuller assessment. Or alternately, I know exactly what's wrong. I just don't know how to deal with it. So I need somebody trained in managing these kinds of things that I don't know how to do. So those are a couple of ideas.
Jonathan, now that you have teenagers, I think you're even better. You're living it, aren't you? Firsthand. Thank you so much. Really, just excellent information. Valerie, was just lovely to have you joining us, and we thank everybody. And this is when we hug the kids. So let's go do that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, everyone. It was a real pleasure.
See you next time.
Bye.